if queer people are the victims, why are the Christians being the ones discriminated against? This is Hot Takes.
I don't like Chick-fil-A.
Taylor Swift is overrated.
If you drive a pickup truck for reasons that are other than employment related, I don't like you.
Listen to your friends who care about astrology.
Escape rooms are fun.
What is your hot take?
Drop a hot take.
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 Welcome back to Hot Takes. I'm your host, Ian Isaiah. So before we begin, disclaimer, I am talking on this point as a gay person who also is a Christian. So I can kind of talk on this issue like really, really well. Just saying, because I have both sides. Both sides are in the argument. Okay, so this story really happened last week, but I wasn't here for it. I was a little upset that I wasn't here to talk about it right when it was happening. But I'm actually glad I didn't cover it because there's actually a second piece that I would like to talk about as well that just happened, like, I want to say Thursday or Friday. So it's still fairly new. But if you haven't heard the news, a teen was arrested last week for protesting against a drag queen event by preaching the gospel. Okay, keep in mind, like when I say peaceful protest, I'm not talking about the Made at BLM peaceful protest.
A protest in Philadelphia that started peacefully this afternoon grew violent, a police car burning.
That's not peaceful protesting. This guy was literally standing on a box or something, speaking words from the Bible.
Police in Wisconsin arresting a Christian youth leader for peacefully protesting a drag queen story hour at a local park with fellow congregants. The young man who you see on your screen is Marcus Schroeder, and he now faces charges for unlawful use of sound amplification and resisting arrest. Schroeder and another number of members of his church reportedly began praying and talking to people who were at the event before they were arrested and let off with warnings if they promised to stay beyond nearby fences.
So the group complying but began protesting from outside the park where the event was happening. Schroeder, using a microphone, began preaching. An officer attempting to take the microphone away before disconnecting the amplifier. Newsmax has reached out again to authorities on this and has not heard back.
So this is a clip from an interview which was 15 minutes long. I'm just going to show bits and pieces, but I have not seen this yet. I've only seen like the very first minute of it or so just to check its legitimacy. So let's jump into it and then we'll talk about it.
Marcus, you have been going viral over the past couple of days. There was an event over the weekend, a pride event in your town in Watertown, Wisconsin there, where you were there preaching the gospel in protest of this event. Take us through what happened. You were arrested during that.
Yeah, so we came there, as you said, we're there to preach the gospel, have a public witness against the drag queen story hour that was going on.
I just have to say before they go any further, the whole concept of drag queen story time, I get it, but it's also kind of stupid. We didn't need it.
Which actually more and more recently, over the last year and a half or so, 2 years, these drag queen story hours are less story hours and more drag queen dance hours. And so that's what they were doing. They had, drag queens dancing for the kids.
Yeah. And that's the real point there. If it was an actual story hour, I would have less of a problem with it, even as a gay man, because it's not appropriate for children when it's like drag queens showing off and all of that. Yeah.
And so I turned on my speaker, was on the public sidewalk, started reading from Galatians 5, which is just a passage about what true love is. And as I was reading from Galatians 5, almost the moment I turn on my speaker and I start reading from the Bible, a bunch of police officers start coming around. And without saying anything to me, no warning, nothing like that, an officer just comes up and starts grabbing my arm, twisting my arm to try and grab the microphone away from me. And then a few moments later, an officer behind me grabs my other arm and they handcuff me and they take me away. And what they ended up charging me with was amplification without a permit and then resisting arrest.
Which sounds stupid. Okay, I said I would talk about this after. This is a stupid point because what is amplification without a permit? What is that?
Oh my God, what is that? Oh my God, what is that?
What is that? Is that an actual thing? Because if so, that is very contradictory to the First Amendment right of free speech. Little weird.
So before we get into those claims against you, was this your first interaction with the cops that day? Had they warned you before? Had you interacted with them before they came over to you?
There had been a little bit of interaction, but nothing with the amplification, no warnings, nothing like that. The amplification, in the video that has gone viral, essentially what has happened is, there are some people who see that section where the officer is like, oh, this is the same speaker as before. So some are like, oh, is this something that they had been warned about? That's not the case. We hadn't been warned about it. The reason why he mentioned that was because earlier that day, one of the guys who was with us had that speaker with him, and he was walking into the drag queen story hour. They had like a fenced in area that they had a permit for. And so he was walking in there. He didn't have this amplification on. He wasn't using it or anything like that. But an officer essentially came up and said that he couldn't have it inside the fence because they had a permit for that area, and then told him that he had to take it out of the fence. And so he took it out of the fence, and then a few hours later, I started using it for the first time, and I was using it outside the fence on the public sidewalk away from their permitted area, the area that they had gotten the permit for. And so, in compliance with the only criteria that he had mentioned earlier. And as soon as I started doing that, there was no warnings. That was our first time using the amplification all day. No warnings. That's when the officer just came up and started ripping the microphone from my hand.
So they handcuff you. What happened after that? Did they take you to the police station? Take us through sort of the events that followed.
Yeah, they took me off to this building that they had kind of had a police headquarters kind of set up for the park that day in this park building. I stayed there for probably 20 minutes, 30 minutes, something like that. Was talking with a few of the officers back and forth. Was just trying to get information, why I was being arrested, what laws I broke, things like that. And then they took me to the police station, got my information, put me on the record, things like that. And then they gave me 2 citations, the 2 that I mentioned, the amplification and the resisting arrest. And then they let me free. But what they said was that they had a restriction that they put on that was that for the next 2 weeks, I'm not allowed to be on or be by any Watertown public parks. And if I am, I'm going to be automatically arrested again and charged with state charges.
Which is just absolutely ridiculous. Okay. No prior warning, no prior altercation, just immediate arrest. And now he's not 2 weeks, not that bad, whatever. But are you serious? For expressing his First Amendment right to free speech? That's not right. But notice, it's because it was against a drag queen event. Just saying.
So you were given these citations. What does that mean? Do you go to court from here? What's sort of the next step in this process? Is it a fine, or do you actually have to go through a legal process from here?
Yeah, I'm planning on taking it to court. And so, yeah, the fine for the citations was like $500 for resisting arrest, and then almost $200 for the amplification without a permit. And so I do plan on taking it to court. I've had a few law firms reach out and things like that. They want to take my case. So
I'm glad he's at least taking it to court, and there are lawyers that are willing to work on his case because, I mean, hopefully, haven't heard any news because I think the story's still too new. But hopefully the conclusion is that the charges are dropped and there's some sort of reparation done because this honestly was unjust behavior.
So that's interesting. So they arrest you, they give you a citation. So this wasn't a situation where you were they're going to make you show up to court. Now they basically gave you the citation. You owe them money over this, and then you though are going to challenge this. Is that correct? That's sort of the correct framing.
Yeah, just like a normal ticket. Like, if you wish, you can show up to court, but This.
Yeah, that's what's so interesting to me. I think, hearing the story, and I don't know what the local laws and ordinances are there.
And that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying is we don't know the local ordinances, but this is somewhere in America. I'm almost positive. Yeah, I'm pretty sure this is somewhere in America, which would completely violate the First Amendment right.
Why were you not just fined? Why were you arrested too? I think that's the right, because, if somebody's speeding, they're not arrested, they're given a fine, right? So that is, as far as is that common practice in an event like this?
Not that I'm aware of. That's, I've been to many different events like this and never ever even come close to being arrested. And so, I've had many interactions with the police about amplification on public sidewalks. And so we typically know the codes. Each city is a little different. So Watertown was a little different than some of the other cities I've been to on what that exactly looks like. But typically what happens is an officer will come up to us and be like, hey, look, you have to turn the decibel level down. It'll typically be something like that. Or they'll say, you can't do this here. But, every once in a while an officer will be like, but if you, walk over and cross the street there, you can do it over there.
Okay. Free speech, but you're not allowed to amplify your voice.
But
the same people who did it in the Black Lives Matter movement never got arrested for it because that was peaceful protesting. I'm calling BS on this right now. This is absolutely ridiculous. Are you serious? Is this really where we're headed? Is this really what we want to see?
Sometimes it's just little things like that, but we'll have that discussion with them. This time, none of that happened. It was, no warning, nothing like that.
It's just horrendous news. And once again, if you want to see the whole video, I'll leave a link in the description and a pinned comment. It's absolutely... I have no words for it. I really don't, because it's just, this is religious discrimination at its finest. And if you say that LGBTQ, the majority of the radical portion of it, isn't a religion, you are sitting on a throne of lies. That is 100% a religion through and through that they have cultivated out of the queer community. 100%. You look at it, it has all of the same factors of pretty much every other religion, minus maybe a religious book. The practices, indoctrination, which they claim they don't have. It's not indoctrinating our children, and they use the excuse of, when we say stop indoctrinating our children, they say, oh, but you use religious indoctrination. Okay, fair play. But we are teaching based upon our beliefs. So for you to say that that's not a religious indoctrination, bullcrap. It really is. And at first I was like, this is insane, this is wrong, and I was just going to leave it at that. But then, on top of that, I saw this headline on Instagram, which I cannot find the original post to anymore. So let's look up an article on it. This is from Boston.com. Lawsuit. Massachusetts Catholic couple says they were barred from fostering children over LGBTQ plus beliefs. Mike and Kitty Burke, a Catholic couple from Southampton, say they were turned away as foster parents over their religious views on gender and sexuality. It's the exact same story again. The exact same story. What is this? How is this okay? This is religious discrimination at its finest, because it is their belief in their religion. This is what they believe, but because it's against LGBTQ people, they're not allowed to adopt. And they say that they're in the oppressed class, LGBTQ people. Hate to break it to you, you're not. But guess who is? Christians. And I don't get angered at that many things. I'm a bit of a hothead, but there's a difference between being a bit of a hothead and being genuinely angered at something. I don't get that angered over many things. But this ticks me off so much. You wouldn't even imagine how much. And in case you're wondering what they said about the child and LGBTQ beliefs, this is what they said. Mike and Kitty emphasized that they would love and accept their child no matter his or her future sexual orientation or struggles with gender identity. And this is exactly what our belief teaches. Love the sinner, hate the sin. And I do hate that phrase. I do. But I also agree with it because I don't think there's a better way to say it. And this is where I am going to take a stance maybe against the Christian side and for the LGBTQ side, is because it seems like there are a lot of Christians who like to focus solely on that as being an issue of a sin matter. Right. They like to glaze over other things that happen, such as habitual liars. There are habitual liars everywhere, but a lot of Christians like to ignore that and focus on the LGBTQ people, at least at face. And I know that's not all Christians, but that's a lot of Christians. If you're going to say love the sinner, hate the sin, then you have to call out sins like that as well. That is one from the 10 Commandments, thou shalt not lie. Homosexuality, there's maybe 1 or 2 verses, sections in the Bible that talk about it, but the big 10 that God ordained, thou shalt not lie is one of them. Thou shalt not steal. That's a big one. And that one I would say is more split, but again, there are Christians that like to excuse that. Thou shalt not covet. Thou shalt not lust. Covet. Want what your neighbor has. I feel like everybody deals with that on a certain level. Why isn't that talked about as much? But LGBTQ is talked about. Just saying, I do have points from both sides that I think need to be discussed. Overall, religious discrimination through and through. No other thing to call it, point blank, religious discrimination. And it is not okay. And if we don't speak up, fellow Christians, we're gonna lose. Thank you for watching this episode of Hot Takes. If you enjoyed this video, which I hope you did, please make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. It really helps me out, and it makes sure you never miss a future episode. Thanks, guys.